All right, good evening and welcome to the W's MFA in Creative Writing full residency for 2026. This is our first full residency reading. We will have 3 featured readers this evening. Jordan Taylor Barlow will read first. Each night we'll have 1 or 2 of our thesis students, of our residency students reading, and 1 or tonight 2 of our thesis students who will read. Mckensi White will be second. She's planning to defend her thesis, not this week, but later in the summer. We just had too many people this week to fit everybody in. So in a little bit she'll be defending. And Morgan will be reading last and did or did not successfully defend your thesis. All right. I'm Kendall Dunkelberg. Welcome to our evening, whether you're here in person or live on YouTube. So Jordan, if you will start us out, and I will ask each of our readers to introduce themselves.
Good evening and welcome back. Just as a reiteration, I'm Jordan Taylor Barlow. Y'all saw me last night. Yeah, so I'm from Columbus, and this tonight's reading I'm going to be reading is titled Consignment Intake Form. It is a hermit crab essay, which in nonfiction, a hermit crab just takes on the shell of something else to kind of tell the story. It's starting to do that feedback thing again, so. All right, item 1, prom dress, purple with rhinestones down the back, senior prom. That night felt like a victory, not the loud, obvious kind, but a quiet, glowing pride you carried in your chest. A moment in your youth that promises, falsely maybe, that you will always be able to return to it and smile. It was not the dance partners who blurred together under the dim fairy lights, nor was it the overly sweet, sparkling punch served in plastic cups. It was not even the music, songs of the 2000s, that pulsed through the floor and vibrated within your ribs. It was the way you felt in that deep purple, a color so rich it felt borrowed, like something you hadn't quite earned the right to. Royalty stitched into stretched chiffon, rhinestones tracing your spine like constellations no one could name or claim. Silver shoes to match, catching the light with every step. You believed for a single shimmering moment that the story of you, fully realized, had finally decided to start. But your story does not start that night. It lingered, waiting, somewhere just out of reach. It will not start in all the years, in the remaining years of your earliest memories, not in the photographs or the laughter or the careful posing. It will not begin until much later, when you are free from the expectations you once craved. When you finally feel deserving of that royal and lush color instead of feeling like you're wearing someone else's life. Condition, torn, mud-stained on the train, rhinestones coming off at the seams. The stones no longer glitter the way they did that night, but if you hold them just to the light just right, it still catches the light. Item 2, yellow floral summer dress, size 3X, faded, college. This was your favorite dress, not because it was perfect, and it never tried to be perfect, but because it was easy. The evidence is plain to see in the way the fabric softened over time, the way the spring florals slowly faded from their original bright yellow to something quieter, more forgiving. Each wash took something from it and somehow gave something back. You run your thumb over the fabric, savoring the familiarity, the kind of worn-in comfort you couldn't find anywhere else. You felt more like yourself in this dress. It became a comfort during a time when you barely felt like yourself in your own skin. There were days you put it on not because you loved how you looked, but because you didn't have the energy to hate it. It asked nothing of you. It didn't pinch or pull or remind you of what you wished you were different. You wore it with your shoulders exposed, hoping that showing your shoulders would be enough, that there would be enough softness, enough femininity, enough proof that you could be seen the way you always wanted to be seen, and not feel like a giant balloon paraded down a crowded street. You adjust the straps often, a repetitive gesture like you could shift yourself into something more certain with just a small movement. And still, there were moments, either walking across campus, sitting in the grass, catching your reflection in a window, where you almost felt or believed it worked. When you almost believed you were becoming the version of yourself you'd been trying so hard to find. Condition, worn thin, faded, stretched in places, too large to be worn again, though it once felt like the only thing that would ever fit. Item 3, blue jumpsuit, size 1X, new, tag still on. You bought this as a celebration of all the happy moments you have earned, though you weren't sure of how to celebrate them. You watched the scale slowly creep toward a number that once felt like a finish line, a number that promised rest, ease, and maybe, just maybe, acceptance. You thought maybe this is what destination looked like. And even then, you needed something to feel like yourself in this new body. This body, both familiar and foreign, felt like moving into a house that still held traces of the previous tenant. You tried it on in the store. The lighting is too bright, too honest. You pinched, tugged, and smoothed fabric over your hips, your stomach, your thighs, your arms. You turned sideways, then forward again. You marveled at the difference 2 years made, at the way your face softened into something sharper. You gaped at the way your body was shifting into new proportions you were still learning to recognize. But your mind lingered to the pockets. Why did they bulge like that? Why did the fabric pull in places you didn't want to? You stood there longer than needed, trying to solve a problem that wasn't really about the jumpsuit in the first place. You hesitated before stepping out of the changing room, an uneasiness settling in your chest. Not of the jumpsuit, but of being seen, of being evaluated, of hearing something that might undo all the progress you have made and more. You stepped out anyways. Your husband looked at you and told you that you were beautiful. He said it so easily, without a moment's hesitation, like it was so obvious to him, like it had always been this way. He says this looking at you, not the jumpsuit, not at the seams or the fit or the places you had been smoothing, just you. It is this mistake, this beautiful, frustrating misunderstanding that makes you want this jumpsuit in your own home. It is this moment that convinces you to buy it, and it now hangs there, new and untouched, among the other clothes that do not hug your form the way this one does, waiting perhaps for a version of you that believes him. Condition, only tried on once, indentations on the shoulders from the hanger, tag still attached. For sake of time, I'm going to skip this to the last item. Item 5, black business dress, knee length, structured fit, interview attire. You bought this dress with intention, not the soft, searching kind you carried with the others, but something sharper, purposeful even. This was not a dress for becoming, this was the dress for proving. You stood in front of the mirror longer than you expected until the morning of your interview. You smoothed the fabric over your hips, adjusted the button sleeves, checking the neckline for professionalism, for modesty, for just enough presence without being too much. You wanted to be noticed, but not over so. You paired it with sensible shoes, the kind that say you are serious, dependable, someone who can be trusted with teaching the next class of information literacy. You imagine yourself already there, promoted, walking the stack, speaking in softened tones, handling materials with a level of care. You imagine your name on an office door, or at least a small placard, something that said you belonged in this new role, and yet the interview did not go as planned, and you cannot and will not blame the dress. There wasn't a moment that you could point and say, there, that's where it all went wrong. It was larger than that. A misconnection 3 years in the making, an answer that felt too long or not long enough, pauses that felt as though they stretched on far too long. You felt yourself watching for somewhere in the room, analyzing every shifted movement and tone. You smiled when you were supposed to. You nodded with grace. You spoke about your passion, your experience, and your willingness to learn. But something didn't land. Or maybe it did, just not in the way you'd hoped. When it was over, you walked back to your car, still wearing the version of yourself you had tried to present. The dress held its shape, structured and composed, even as you felt something inside you sink. You wondered if you could tell, not just the nerves, but the desire, the wanting. The way you needed this to be more than just a job. The way you hoped it might be a place where you could finally feel settled and enough. You never wear this dress again. It remembers too much. Condition, wrinkled only at the waist from sitting far too long. Thank you.
my water up here, so now I'm gonna need it. So, but good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jordan, for that lovely reading. My name is Mckensi White, and I just finished my last semester here at the W, and I won't be defending until July, but Ellen convinced me that I needed to have my moment at the residency, so here I am. And I'll keep it brief, but I wanted to say a few things before I begin my reading. I wanted to thank Dr. Dunkelberg and my committee, Mary Miller and Brandy Wilson, for being so patient with me, and I hope reading my thesis is worth the wait. A very special thank you to Ellen Ann, my director, for being so encouraging and supportive, even when I was being unnecessarily hard on myself. She has no idea how appreciative I am of her, and her guidance over the past 2 semesters means so much to me. My husband and mother are here tonight, 2 of my biggest supporters, as well as friends and family who are hopefully watching if they could figure out the links that I sent them. And lastly, thank you to my classmates who read 1 or 2 of these pieces that helped shape them into what they are today. I wanted to say a few things about my collection before I get into it. As most of you know, I lost my father to suicide in 2023. And I'd lost him to addiction long before his death, but like me, my father was also a child of an alcoholic who endured years of physical and mental abuse from his own father. My collection of essays spans from my earliest memories of my father at 4 years old to the present as I reckon with his loss. As I searched for answers by digging deep into my family's history and memories, I learned to separate the man from my father. And despite my complicated relationship with him, I loved him dearly, and this collection is in memory of him. I'm going to read 2 essays tonight. The first is a second-person essay that I wrote, inspired by Ryan Von Meter's essay, If You Knew Then What I Know Now, which is addressed to his past self. The title of this piece is If I Could Tell You After Auden, which is one of my favorite poems by him, and several of you have read this essay. And it is a very emotionally charged piece, and I go into some dark topics in this piece as well. About my father's suicide, and while I know this room is full of writers that are accustomed to this type of material, I will always give warning about the content because your mental health is important, and if you ever feel like you need to step away at any time, please do so. If I could tell you, time will say nothing, but I told you so. Time only knows the price we have to pay. If I could tell you, I would let you know. W.H. Auden. When you wake up on February 21st, 2023, it feels like every other Tuesday. You reach to turn off your 7 a.m. alarm. Sunlight fills the space of your bedroom. You pull the covers over your head, except this time you aren't alone. The heavy, warm weight of your husband makes you think twice before getting out of bed. You won't remember why he didn't go to work that day, but in a few hours, you'll be glad he didn't, and you'll wish you stayed in bed with him. But instead, you kiss his forehead and you roll out from under the covers, check the weather on your phone. It's warm out. You throw on jeans and a long sleeve t-shirt. Because although it's February, it's Mississippi. You arrive at Starbucks with a few minutes to spare and order your breakfast and coffee. The store is busy as usual, and you don't get your order until you're clocked in and sitting down to do tips for the week. You put on a podcast, drink your coffee, and begin to count the money. It's 10:30 when you finish, and you order another latte for the road, but you're stopped by a coworker on his lunch break in the lobby. Although you need to go to the grocery store, you sit and talk to him for a while you wait for your drink. You tell him you just finished reading Where the Crawdads Sing and that you plan to watch the movie tonight with your husband. You have to assume the movie is good, considering all that you've heard about it, but you don't get around to watching it that night. You never do. You go to the grocery store, you drive home, you take a shower. Your excitement builds for the at-home date night you and your husband have planned, so you don't notice the unease in his voice when he asks how much longer you'll be. You wonder, what's the rush? You think you have all night. but you don't know your mother is on her way to your house as you wash your hair. You are in a t-shirt and underwear, a towel wrapped around your head when your husband announces your mom is here. You still don't hear the urgency in his voice, how he's trying to remain calm. Nor do you question why your mother has shown up at your house without warning. How do you not notice? Your entire center shifts when you hear the solemn pitter-patter of her heels down the hall. Then you see her face, and before you can utter a word, she says, "Your dad killed himself." You don't believe her at first. You don't want to believe her. But then reality sets in, and a wave of numbness rushes through you like morphine being injected into your veins. You think, how could he do this to me? But you refuse to let yourself cry, to really cry, until after the funeral. When you are sitting in the front row at your father's graveside service, you won't remember how you got there. You look at the closed casket in front of you and think there's been a mistake. How do you really know it's him in there? You imagine jumping out of your fold-out chair and demanding that they throw it open so you can see him one last time. In truth, you want to lay your head on his chest where the bullet went in to make sure the beating has stopped before they lower him into the ground. You decide you don't really want to know. You look down to see your husband's hand wrapped around yours, but you can't feel it. Your fingers limp in his grip. The preacher's words drone off into a soft, dull noise as he rambles on about your father finally being free of his sin. Instead, focus on the black floral designs and the white dress your mother passed down to you. You chose it with your father in mind, even after being divorced for 17 years. He never moved on, never remarried. Wonder what that says about you that you wore her dress. Have you always been competing for his love with your mother like this? You think of the George Jones song. He really did stop loving her today. Notice the small hairs standing at attention on your legs and ask yourself as you look to your muddy, wet feet why you decided to wear open-toed shoes and no stockings. It's a disease, not a sin. He had a disease, your Nana declares, jerking you from your trance. Yes, the preacher proclaims, and now he is at rest. You have a hard time believing what he says is true. You start spending more time in the shower, taking longer and longer because it reminds you of a time before your father was gone. You think maybe if you stay under the running water, nothing bad can ever happen again. When you get out, will your mother be there to tell you someone else is dead? You close your eyes to fight back the familiar sting of tears and talk to your father as if he were still there. How could you do this to me? Do your questions come out as whispers, or are they in your head? Does your husband hear you talking to yourself? No, he doesn't, because he isn't there. It's just you and the dog while he's halfway across the world on deployment. Life goes on, but you don't. You make dinner, take out the trash, fold the laundry, all the while you are reminded of the gun in your husband's bedside table. You open the drawer to make sure the Glock is still there. You pick it up, feel the weight in your hand, and set it back down again. Sometimes you take it out. You sleep with it on top of the table. You think how easy it would be, how easy it was for your father. You didn't even know he owned the gun, but you push the thought away because if you were gone, then who would take care of the dog? Instead, you pull the plastic storage box that once was his out from under your bed and open it. A faint mix of Head and Shoulders and Dove soap mixed with his musk fills your nose. You wish you could bottle it. You let your cheek fall on the scratchy surface of the blue towels he once used to dry his body, but you don't care because one day his scent will be gone along with everything else that once was his. You start going to therapy because that feels like the healthy thing to do. But when your therapist asks you at the end of your session if you're having thoughts of suicide, it makes you mad. She knows about your dad. That's why you're sitting in her office. So why would she ask you that? Doesn't she know that hearing the words feel like a blow to the head? Then you remember the gun and you stop going to therapy for a while. You convince yourself that nothing she could say will help you anyway. Wake up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a night in a panic, your breath short, eyes wide, search frantically for the dog. When you fell asleep, she was tucked between your chin and neck, but now has moved to the foot of the bed. You pull her close. She is small, and you are scared you might roll over and suffocate her in the night. But you can't stand to be apart. She is the only thing that you can control. Remind yourself that she can't get away. She won't leave you. She won't leave. Everyone worries about you. Even if they don't say it, you can feel it. They tiptoe around you with texts of, I'm thinking about you and how are you doing? You want to tell them to stop. Stop thinking about you. Stop asking how you're doing. You're not okay. You feel like you won't be okay for the rest of your life. Don't they know what it's like to lose a father to suicide? You won't visit his grave but twice a year, on Father's Day and his birthday, though if it's not too hot or rainy out, you'll put it off till the next day, then the next, and the next. Some years you won't go at all. You tell yourself you don't need to visit a stone to feel close to your father. Instead, listen to songs that remind him of you. Close your eyes, he's right there with you. No one can take that feeling away. In a year, you'll celebrate your first wedding anniversary in the Smoky Mountains. As you drink red wine in a hot tub surrounded by snow, all you can think about is how in a month a year ago your father would be dead. The only difference now is that you know it's coming and you still can't stop it. You still think there's something you could have done, even if you stop telling people that so they'll quit worrying. You wonder if one day you'll ever be able to celebrate your marriage without thinking not just of your dad, but what he did. You'll also wonder how you managed to get through that first year. It'll still feel like it just happened yesterday and years ago. You still ask yourself, why? In 3 years, you'll feel like you know your father in death, better in death than you ever did while he was living. You will understand his addiction more. You will feel more empathetic towards him. You will have started to heal. You won't always cry when smelling what lingers of his scent or when looking at your wedding photos, but you can never stop the tears when seeing a little girl hug her father. His belongings will become more yours than his. You will be able to say you don't feel responsible or guilty for his death and mean it. You will want to be angry at him for leaving you, but you just can't. The shock of his death won't be so surprising, and you find comfort in admitting that it makes sense. You find some peace, and you hope he has found some too. You tell yourself that if he was suffering that much, then what right did you have to keep him there? Though sometimes you still wish you both could have suffered just a little longer. You don't have to like his decision, but you want to respect it. And though right now you wonder what you could have done, that's just not something you were ever meant to know. Well, I'm gonna lighten the mood a little. So, this is the second essay I'm gonna read. I call it my dirty dancing essay, and it's probably one of my favorites in my collection. But the official title is Big Girls Don't Cry, and I'm not gonna say much about this one. I'm just gonna jump right into it. So, this is Big Girls Don't Cry. I rewatch Dirty Dancing at the turn of every summer. The Mississippi humidity reminds me what it must have felt like in the staff quarters where all the horny staff members snuck off to grind on each other. It also reminds me how, when I watched the film for the first time at 12 years old, I hadn't given much thought about what it meant to lose my innocence. The sensual music, hot and heavy dancing, and Patrick Swayze all awakened something inside my prepubescent body, something I still can't shake. I could put aside the abortion subplot and obvious age gap relationship because those things felt adult and I so badly wanted to be one. I yearned for a coming of age story like Baby's who, despite her elevated social class, falls in love with the leather jacket wearing bad boy everyone pines for and finds personal and sexual liberation in the form of a group dance scene. Except I was of no elevated social class. My father wasn't a doctor I idolized, and I never thought someone who looked even a little like Patrick Swayze would ever look my way. That was the summer of 2013 when my mother begged me to watch every movie she loved growing up in the 80s and 90s. That was before I truly understood the severity of my father's addiction, before I realized my innocence had already been taken from me, when I started wearing makeup, push-up bras, and shopping at Rue 21 instead of Justice, and I thought I would never find a man as hot as Dean Winchester from Supernatural. That was the summer everything changed. And as I sat snug in my bed, watching baby lie to her father about where she was during the day and learning how to dance instead, my father was in rehab, and I had every reason to believe I was the one who landed him there. After his last relapse, my father found a short reprieve at the Refuge, a faith-based halfway house where they shoved Jesus so far down your throat that if you even thought about relapsing, you had to throw him back up first. What I learned about my father from the prior 6 years spent in his shared custody was irrelevant when compared to what I knew to be his one defining personality trait. He was an alcoholic. But his drinking felt more like a curse word. I knew it, but wasn't allowed to say it. My brother and I spent every other Sunday at the Refuge, biding our time until we could go home. We'd sit in what they called church for an hour, listening to songs from a speaker, watching lyrics fade in and out from a YouTube video being projected onto a screen. As we stood and sang, I swayed side to side to How Great Is Our God, when all I really wanted to do was sit down. From those few Sundays daydreaming through church until it was time for lunch, the only thing that stands out in my memory is choosing to opt out of a group prayer activity where everyone paired up and off at random, then being forced to participate anyway when someone was left odd-numbered out. I sat in the back with an older lady who seemed old to a 12-year-old, but it just might have been the tired look in her eyes, the same one I now find reflecting back at me in the mirror over a decade later. She told me she was there visiting her son and asked what I wanted to pray for. I told her for school and for my father. I wasn't sure why I wanted to pray for him. I just felt as though I should. She prayed for herself, for her son. She prayed I would do well in school and for my father. I was touched by her kindness. I wished I could remember more of our conversation and her prayer. I wish I could remember all that I said to her. I hope her son is doing better than my father, and I hope she's still out there somewhere praying for me. After church, a feast of Southern delights awaited me. Everything from fried chicken to potato salad and strawberry shortcake to peach cobbler. As my lunch digested, I would change out of my church dress and carry on with the rest of the day, playing foosball in the game room or frisbee outside. My father would show off his latest project he was working on with some of the other men living at the Refuge. He was a natural builder, so instead of drinking, he began woodworking. One Sunday afternoon, I walked out onto the back patio to see the swing he had helped build and the shy smile that crossed his clean-shaven face. Aside from keeping him busy, I was proud to see him proud of accomplishing something. A small glimmer of hope grew inside me every time I saw my father doing well. But that glimmer, that small spark, could be snuffed just as quick when my mother would sit my brother and me down to say, "Your dad is in rehab again." I received my first Nook e-reader the previous Christmas from my father's mother, Nana. I never filled it up with ebooks, though I did get into reading. I stayed up late most nights in my twin-size bed, pressed up against the wall under my covers, reading supernatural fan fiction, and listening to Marvin Gaye radio on the Pandora app, hoping Let's Get It On would play before I ran out of skips. My Nook must have overheated from all the smut I was reading every day, because within a few months of having it shut off and refused to power back on. My father was convinced he could fix it, and I had no reason to doubt him. I had seen the wooden benches and swing sets he built at the Refuge, but building furniture and providing technical support proved to be two different skills for him. I reluctantly handed over the device during a Sunday visit, not wanting my dirty secret to be uncovered, but desperate to have it back in my hands. On the Sundays my brother and I didn't visit, my father would call at the same time every evening. The following Sunday, I entrusted my father with my Nook. I eagerly awaited his call. When my brother finally handed over our mom's maroon Motorola, I fled outside for better reception, hoping for good news. I caught it immediately, the change in his tone. One moment I could understand him, the next I couldn't. He sounded like my father, but didn't. "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" I asked. But he failed to reassure me everything was fine. I tried to move past it and ask about my Nook. "I'm sorry, sweetie, I couldn't fix it," he slurred. I might have been upset about the loss of my Nook, but the way my father was speaking upset me even more. When I managed to get him off the phone, I ran back inside and straight to my mother, who was in the bath. "Something's wrong with Dad," I told her, describing the sound of his voice. trying to find the words to explain how I could feel that something was wrong. Her expression went blank and she took the phone from me. I stood in the living room with my brother, waiting for our mother to come out of the bathroom and tell us what we already knew. The usual wave of numbness I felt after hearing the news never came. I was in shock, rattled by my father's drunken state. I couldn't get the sound of his voice out of my head. It was like a rock had come flying out of nowhere, nailing the front of a car's windshield, and the glass slowly began to crack and spread. The visible upset that paralyzed me caused something to snap inside my brother. He wadded up the paper towel in his hand and threw it as hard as he could, but the weight of it was too insignificant to cause any damage. The steely glint in his eye, the tightness of his jaw. I had never seen my brother, who I viewed as passive and almost emotionless, so angry before. While I understood he was angry on my behalf, his rage terrified me. That same anger that made me freeze in fear would replace the indifference I felt towards my father. I was unable to comprehend that I had lost more in one night than I had in my entire lifetime by witnessing how two of the men I loved most could hurt me. What my mother didn't tell me that night was that my father fled the refuge and hid in a motel with a friend for a week, refusing to come out and drinking himself into a stupor. When he finally did come out, he didn't go back to the refuge, he didn't go back to the refuge, but to rehab. A part of me was relieved that I wouldn't have to return to the refuge or sit through another boring church service. I'd miss the peach cobbler, though. And while my father was in rehab, far from my mind, writing down who he needed to make amends to, I'd be spinning around in my room with earbuds in, singing tone deaf to the high-pitched parts of Stay by Maurice Williams and the Zodiacs. I was just a girl then, a girl who couldn't wait to be a woman, who now wishes she could go back, if just for a day. A girl who, unlike Baby, never had to worry about her father not approving of a boy she liked or hearing the words, "You're not the person I thought you were." Though I wish I could say that was all he had done. Just as Baby's father let her down for being too quick to judge others, my father let me down too. He let me down that night and continued to let me down. The girl that I was didn't know it wasn't her fault that her father was back in rehab. I couldn't tell her that he put himself there just as he had every other time before. Yet she still carried the guilt of his relapse, thinking she pushed him to the brink with her broken nook. She didn't know he was already on the edge, that he always had to blame someone else for his disease, unable to face reality. My father's suicide was 2 years behind me when I rewatched Dirty Dancing in 2025. As I purchased the film to rent rather than buy it and save myself some money, my husband was lying sick on the couch with a nasty case of COVID that rendered him immobile for 3 days. As always, I turned up the volume on the television when Cry to Me by Solomon Burke began to play, my favorite song from the movie. A familiar bashful feeling crept up my neck and face as Baby and Johnny started to dance. I was 12 again, watching the scene for the first time. I still yearn for that same coming-of-age story, the one I never had, the one most people never have. And while I didn't marry Dean Winchester like I hoped, I did marry a stubborn, green-eyed, dark-haired man who cares for me better than anyone ever could. He shows me that my dreams, even the ones I had at 12, are still alive, and he does his best to make them come true. Baby thought she would never find a guy like her father, the very thing I grew up afraid of. I see now it wasn't that I didn't want to marry someone like my father necessarily, but that I didn't want to marry someone who shared the bad parts of him. For years, those parts were all I could see before realizing that I shared those bad parts with him more than anyone. In a perfect world, I would spend my 17th summer at a resort like Kellerman's, except now I am the same age as the actress who played Baby in when Dirty Dancing was filmed, and somehow that makes me believe it's not too late. I glanced over at my husband, who watched Johnny embrace Baby through hooded eyes and said, "I want you to do that to me." Thank you.
Good question.
Okay.
Both of
If you
you.
have any questions, please go easy on. The questions, great. Yeah,
So you put a collection together of essays.
Mhm.
Why did you pick these two? And then maybe could you tell us a couple of topics that of the other essays?
Yes, yes. So originally, and I gave a lot of people a heartache about this, trying to decide which essays I wanted to read tonight. And I originally, I was always going to read the Dirty Dancing essay, but I was going to read an essay that was about me and my husband. And I'd realized when I got up here, I was going to be like, this collection is about my dad, and then read an essay that had nothing to do with it. So I do have a few essays in my collection about how I met my husband, but it also plays into how my mother and father met, because like me and my husband, we were high school sweethearts, and we met young, and I wanted to write about the concept of a first love. And my grandparents were each other's first loves, and then, my mom and dad were first loves. And so I combined those two essays together. So it would have made a lot more sense if I'd have read them together, but it was like 15 pages long, and I don't have no time for that. So, but the majority of the collection itself goes through time talking about my relationship with my father specifically. And it's also very grounded in place because I was born and raised here. My father lived here for as long as I can remember. So I wanted the essays that I read tonight to reflect that relationship as much as possible. Katrina.
Thank you for sharing that. I never really heard your essays before. I've always been in poetry classes with you, so it's been a real treat.
Thank you.
One thing I've learned about you is that you have this tendency toward perfection when you write your stories and when you write your poetry. So I'm wondering, do you have that challenge with your essays, or do you feel more naturally inclined with your essays to share than you do with your poetry?
On the surface, I don't feel as confident in my poetry as I do when it comes to fiction and nonfiction. But what was the first part of your question? I'm sorry.
Do you feel more naturally inclined to share your fiction and nonfiction than you do with your poetry? There's a lot for perfection that you tend to have.
Okay, so yes, perfectionism. So yeah, several times Ellen Ann had to tell me it's not going to be perfect. And I was like, yes, I understand that. But I also am very open about talking. I talk about my OCD a lot. And that's also an element of, my writing. I do want it to be perfect, to me. And I said I have criteria, and I get to the point where I'm like, this will never be perfect because there's always going to be things that I'm going to want to add in the future. And I think that's been my biggest struggle. But I'm more inclined to share my fiction and nonfiction just because I'm not as confident when it comes to writing poetry.
That was beautiful.
Thank you so much. Yes.
That was wonderful to hear and very brave. And my name's Amy, and your name came up during the short residency. One of your colleagues was talking about a craft essay that you had done on the use of the second person voice in creative nonfiction. And I'm wondering what you have to say about that, using that voice, and what that was like for you and how you made that.
Yes, I was kind of hoping somebody would ask that question. I don't know how much justice I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna try. And this is probably has been said, 1,000 times before. But I think that was the first Ryan Von Meter's If You Knew Then What I Knew Now was like the first second person essay that I read that I actually paid attention to and felt and got immersed in, even though his experience is completely different from mine. With second person, I've fallen in love with second person because I felt like, before it just got a bad rap. Like everybody, I felt like dogged second person, like, oh, it's too immersive. And I find that when that's the case, my hot take is that it's not being used correctly, if that's how it's coming across. So I always encourage people when they're having a hard time with like a difficult piece that's full of emotion, dark and deep emotions, that it's hard to go back and revisit. Second person is such an effective tool to go back to a place that feels impossible to go back. And in my second person essay specifically, that was such a dark time in my life. I was alone. My husband was on deployment. My dad had just, passed away. I was home alone by myself. And so it was really hard for me to keep pulling myself out of it. And when I couldn't even think about writing an essay from a first person's perspective, but I knew that if I felt these things, that there was somebody else out there who felt the exact same thing. And while right now I can't convey them in a first person narrative, the second person has really helped me when it comes to revisiting such a difficult and dark time in my life. Thank you. Was it you, Meriwether? Did you bring up the second person?
That was.
I looked at Jordan when she did it. She said it.
Came up a couple of times though, on the short residency. You have fans.
What can I say?
Love the hair.
It's just hair.
No, there's hair and then there's hair.
Thank you.
So sorry about the computer. I should have printed it, but here we are. That was great, Mckensi. That was a great, and Jordan, you did fantastic as well. My name is Morgan Wilson. Most of y'all have had class with me at least once. Some of y'all are fresh faces I've never met before. I'm from Tupelo, Mississippi. I typically write fiction. I lean towards psychological thrillers and horror. That's just kind of my thing. And for my thesis, I did a novel with it's around 300 pages or so. It's about a girl. Her name is Cass, or Casilla, but short of Cass. She enters a town named Maywood, and after she enters, she cannot leave because the Maywood is in the Appalachian Mountains. It's isolated, surrounded by woods, and in those woods is an entity called a co-op that imitates people in horrific ways and shows the ugliest, most gory side of humanity possible back to the people who see it and psychologically traps them inside this town. For my reading, I will be jumping around, but I will explain anything since it's a novel. A lot of the details are very much connected, so I will have to fill you in a couple times, but I won't go too crazy with it. But I'm gonna start off on chapter 1 at the very beginning. I was thoroughly fucked. Love this sentence. My little silver Honda looked depressed on the side of the highway with its dents and cracked windshield. There was no cell service in the rural parts of the Appalachians. So I walked back and forth across the broken white line in the middle of the road with my cell phone held high. I squinted at it under the canopy in my cupped hand to shade my eyes from the sun. A bar finally popped up, a tiny square beacon of hope at the top of the screen. I smiled and called my friend Sarah, putting her on speaker. She picked up on the second ring. Cass, where are you? We've been waiting for hours. I swear my gas was just full 10 minutes ago. I don't know what happened, but it suddenly started sputtering and it just turned off. I'm on Blue Ridge Parkway on the side of a mountain. I should be about an hour out of town. Can you... Hello? Cass, she said. The bar on the corner of my screen was hanging on for dear life. Can you hear me? I'm stuck on Blue Ridge. Check your signal, I can't hear a word. The screen went black. No, 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 no. I tapped on it violently and dropped my arm at the feet. Damn it. I shuffled back to the car like a chained up dog in the cold rain and dusted off the cookie crumbs from the seat before slumping behind the wheel. I reached in the back seat for my charger. As I rummaged through the mini McDonald's bag stockpiled on top of my suitcase, the roar of a beat up engine crept behind my car. An old red Chevy pickup rounded the side of the mountain and slowed down to park behind me. Now I'm gonna jump to near the end of chapter 1. The narrator, Cass, she's in the woods now trying to get away from the man in the car. His name is Bentley. Get off me! Oh, sweetie, don't fight back so much. It isn't good for women to do all that mess. Just let me take care of you, Casilla. I can show you things as little boys can't do. He used one hand to keep holding my wrists and ran the other at my shirt. Stop, I said. Somebody help me. Bentley laughed. Help, help. Somebody help me. You fucking with me right now? You're acting like I'm hurting you or something. I read to get a leg semi-free enough to knee him in the groin. It didn't make him fall over as I'd hoped, but it did loosen his grip on my wrists. I slithered a hand out and punched him in the neck, the way that my dad had always taught me to do in a situation like this. Right in the Adam's apple, he said. Bentley cupped his hands around his throat and wheezed. His eyes looked like they were about to pop out of his socket. I jumped up and ran again deeper into the woods and further down the mountain. Within seconds, I heard Bentley running after me again. He no longer called my name, but his footsteps and heavy breaths were enough to let me know how much danger I was in of being called. Tom felt both fast and slow. I couldn't run fast enough, nor would he wear out. Finally, a gleam of hope sparked in front of me. Right off the mountain leading into the valley was a cottage, then another, then another. The oaks began to clear out and turn into a rustic neighborhood. Bentley picked up his pace, no doubt fearing that his victim has found a pot of gold at the end of this treacherous pursuit. He was damn near stepping on my heels when I spotted a woman around my age sitting on the front porch in a rocking chair knitting. It wasn't much, but 2 women were better than 1. Help, help me, I screamed out to her, breaking through the threshold of the tree line and running straight for her front porch. Hey! She looked up from her lap and stood from her rocking chair. She didn't move off the porch or try to run inside. She just stared me down as I came at her full force. Once I got to the front porch, I grabbed her hands. You've got to let me in. He's trying to kidnap me. Who? She asked with a steady voice. What do you mean, who? I turned around and found nothing but trees. My brows furrowed and I ran a hand through my hair. She said, I don't see nobody. He was there. He was just right behind me. Don't tell me you didn't see him. All I saw was you hauling ass to my home. The woman let go of my hands and propped hers on her hips. He's just hiding, I promise he is. Bentley, come out, you coward. A sharp pain struck my throat. Tears welled up and I was met with nothing but silence. Jump to chapter 3. Cass has learned from Leah. Leah is the woman from the cabin that she had just ran across. That she has entered the town of Maywood and cannot escape. There's no electricity in this town for her to make a call, and there are no cars. Cass ignores this warning and attempts to escape through the woods, taking a chance that Bentley has finally given up on her. A twig snapped behind me and I froze up, not even for a second before jumping behind a tree. My chest grew heavier. A drop of sweat dripped down my cleavage. Bentley. It had to be Bentley. No. It was probably just an animal. Bentley, he left a long time ago. It was most likely a deer or a squirrel or another twig snapped. I focused on breathing through my nose to make the least amount of sound. I hadn't seen any human tracks this whole time. Was it because they were behind me? What if he waited for me to leave Maywood before making his next move? No, that didn't make sense though. From what I can analyze, Bentley wasn't the type of predator to latch on one person. He didn't seek me out. He simply saw an opportunity and took it. A small bush stood beside the tree I was hiding behind. I made a bold move to hop behind it. Its thorns pricked the thread of my jeans, yet I couldn't bring myself to pull away. Those thorns would have to be my armor for now. I checked at the branches for any large figure, but found none. Was he hiding somewhere? Why didn't he just go ahead and attack? Surely he knew I was by myself and was tracking me this far. Casella? Cass, where are you? I heard Sarah's voice speak out to the distance. It sounded far away enough for it to be low, but close enough to where I could make a run for it. There was no way Sarah would have come into these woods by herself. She was too scared in a fake haunted house one time. There was just no way she'd be out in the middle of the Appalachian. But wait, Mark could be with her. There was still hope. She was there. No, my friends could be here. I pulled myself out of the thorns and ran towards the sound of Sarah's voice. It came from the direction I was originally headed in. Did she find my car? Was I finally near the highway? Cass, where are you? She said louder. My feet propelled even faster. I was near her. I was so close, but I felt like I was at the end of the tunnel of this terrible nightmare. If only I could just make it to the road. All I wanted to see was those bleach blonde waves and freckled skin. I wanted to go home. Cass, where are you? She was practically beside me. I looked around for signs of her hair or even the pavement of the road. I was still on the incline though, and I was surrounded by nothing but trees. Sarah, I called out. Where are you? Cass? The sound came from my left where a thick wall of bushes blocked off my vision from the other side. It took me a minute to get around it, and when I did, I heard her voice again. Cass, where are you? We've been waiting for hours. My feet still. The words, the tone, I remember hearing them just a couple hours ago. No, Sarah wasn't here. Cass, where are you? We've been waiting for hours, her voice repeated. It was close yet distant. It was like she was right in my ear, but physically far away. She sounded like she was on the other line of the phone. Cass, where are you? We've been waiting for hours, I heard to my left. I slowly turned my head and instantly regretted it. Before me was a skeleton hanging from a tree by its neck. My face was in front of his kneecaps. I wanted nothing more than to look away. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't let me. My eyes felt like they were being controlled by this monstrosity of a sight. I trembled where I stood. Cass, where are you? We've been waiting for hours. The voice was coming from the skeleton. The skull was bent over the road, causing the dark voids of the eye sockets to stare down at me. My chest began to cramp from the lack of oxygen. Cass, where? Another twig snapped, and so did my trance. My legs hit the ground. I continued running northwest. A pair of feet stomped behind me. It was Bentley. It had to be Bentley. I ran faster and faster. Where was the highway? I should have been there by now. Please, dear God, don't let me die. The footsteps behind me pounded into my head like a drum on a crescendo. He was getting closer. The sun was setting faster. I was losing time every step I made. I could still feel the taunts of the skeleton on the back of my neck. The little hairs back there stood in defense. I was going to die in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. Any closer than the person behind me got, I would be in his grasp. The ground led to an decline. The trees began to thin out. It gave me hope that I would see pavement. Even if my car couldn't start, I could at least lock myself inside. Maybe someone would drive by and notice I was in trouble. Maybe they'd be kind enough to save me. But I didn't see any pavement. I saw a cabin, and another, and another, all facing strange ways. A path separated two uneven rows of cabins rather than a road. I had somehow come full circle. I didn't stop though. I could still hear the footsteps getting closer. He was practically on my heel. This time, however, I didn't scream. I went right to Leia's house without as much as a knock. As soon as I stepped inside, I slammed the door and locked it. Leia jumped up from the couch. She had been in the exact same spot I left her in. I ignored her and rushed to the bedroom and hid behind the wall. I heard a shuffling from the living room and a rustling of curtains. My heart struggled to pump my blood at the pace it was going. My lungs were having equally hard time expanding and decompressing at a steady rhythm. Black dots spotted my sight. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. It was all I could do. The adrenaline was still jerking at my nerves. I could feel myself crashing from all the running and panicking. I was at my wit's end, and I knew I would shut down soon. There's nobody out there, Leia said as she walked into the room. God, you look like shit. I didn't open up my eyes or respond. I just sat on the floor with my back against the door, breathing as deeply and slowly as possible. I was not okay. I hadn't been okay since I got to the car with Bentley. But hearing Leia's voice felt like an ounce of normalcy. I sucked it in before opening my eyes. What's happening to me? I told you, you can't escape Maywood. Nobody can. We're all stuck here. Her tone was blunt, but her eyes had softened. I shook my head. And the skeleton, it was repeating what Sarah said on the phone. And Bentley, he was chasing me, and I was heading northwest. I know I was. I was heading towards the highway. I didn't make any circles. I didn't turn off the path. How the hell am I back here? Leia walked to the bed, picked up a pillow, and threw it on the floor in front of me. She sat down and grabbed my hands. Listen to me. What you thought you saw and heard wasn't real. At least not in the way that you think. I believe it when you were saying you're being chased, but it wasn't Bentley. Then who? She took a second before responding. After sucking in a breath, she said, "We call it the co-op. Irish for copy. I know, shitty name, but petitions for change are difficult around here." What is it? A demon, maybe a cryptid? Nobody knows, but it messes with your head, shows you things that'll keep you up at night, make you walk in circles for days until you die of exhaustion or starvation. There's no getting away from it or killing it, as far as I know. I ran my hand down my face. Great, a demon. You really expect me to believe that? Her eyes glazed over as she mentally traveled to another universe where I couldn't follow. I've seen it. We all have at some point. You did too, you're just in denial. Nobody has seen its face. When it's not mimicking people or things, it's more like a shadow spreading until you're blind and freezing. I can't explain it, but I know it's real. It's up to you to believe it too. My suggestion, do not make the code prove itself to you. Skeleton that I saw in the forest leaned over my consciousness. What does it want? Your guess is as good as mine. Fear, death. All I know is that nobody goes into those woods. Anybody who does comes back scared or injured. Some won't even talk about what they saw. There was one guy who went years without talking at all. My eyes burned from dryness. I was too scared to blink. A millisecond of darkness felt long enough for the horrific images to gain a physical form and eat me alive. This demon stuff went against everything I'd learned during my time at Georgetown. Hallucinations derived from mental illness, sleep deprivation, and other cognitive issues. I see neurological functions of such people with my own eyes. I couldn't blame the things I saw in the woods on stress, yet there was a call nicking at the back of my brain, disrupting every rational thought I could possibly have. Jump into chapter 7. It is nighttime, and Cass is in a cabin by herself. It's fun. Sleep refused me. There were no car horns, no box fans, or midnight TV programs to drown out the slight shifts in the wooden floor or the soft clashing of leaves being blown in by the Appalachian wind. I stared for hours at the ceiling, or what I assumed to be a ceiling, under the woven blankets gifted by Leia. For better or for worse, there was no light pollution in these parts of the mountains. One can only see full constellation in clear focus, but the ceiling in every corner of this cabin that reached the height of my big toe became quite invisible after the sun turned into the night. Without all the distractions, I was left wondering what was happening outside of Maywood, out there in the real world. I thought of what my friends might be doing in Asheville, of what I would have been doing there once the sun rose. I'd probably be the first awake, sitting on the front porch with a cup of coffee. That porch would have been built with newer wood, and the chairs might have had soft throw pillows that said cheesy Pinterest quotes. Sarah would have been asleep until almost noon after a full night of beer pong and occasional shots of whiskey. Walker, another friend of mine, might have sat with me on the porch to talk about some business idea he intends to put to action, even though his first 5 business plans never made it outside of his thoughts. He'd swear by this one, though. He'd also swear that it would bring him so much money that no woman of his would ever have to need to work again. And every time he'd swear these drinks of his, he'd eye me for possible signs of attraction. I'd secretly wish that he would just go inside so I could sip on my coffee in peace. Our friend Bailey would be scrubbing down the place before murdering our noses with a Lysol. Her boyfriend would have stepped out with Walker for a gulp of air, and Bailey would drag him back in by the air inside to help throw away the beer bottles and pizza boxes. Images of the outside world drained from my thoughts when I heard light scratch on the door, or at least what I assumed to be the door. Started with short picks, creating a staccato rhythm, and then changed into elongated clawing that penetrated my head more so than the wood. I sat it from the blankets and kept my breath to myself. It would pause and scratch, pause and scratch. After the last pause, a familiar voice came to the door. Cass, where are you? We've been awake for hours. Once again, Sarah's voice was muffled as if coming from the phone rather than a person. I stood up, using the bed to block the path from the bedroom door to me. Cass, 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 Cass. I took a step back at each bite of my name until my back hit the wall. I slid down it, landing in a cradle position on the floor. I felt as if I had regressed into a child who believed the monster couldn't see her as she could see it. The voice stopped, but there was no relief. Each shift of the foundation, every time I swore the floor creaked, my muscles tensed as if wishing to turn to stone. Then it started again. It was my mother's voice. It was as clear as if she were standing outside my door. Priscilla? My breath hitched. I wanted to call out for her. I so wanted her to be real, to be alive. Tears that ran down my cheeks and gathered in the dip of my chin. Yet no sound could escape my lips. Casilla, is this where you've been? We've been so worried about you. Open the door, Casilla. It's time to go home. My head lifted from the crooks of my elbows. I wanted to go to her no matter how much my legs refused to cooperate. Tell her how much Dad spiraled since she's been gone. She needed to come home with me, fix the family. But as soon as I wanted to stand, my trembling knees reminded me what I was cowering from. A bucket of rationality poured over me. I couldn't allow myself to be fooled twice. You aren't my mom, I whispered to myself. I'm here now, my baby Casilla. Let me get you out of this place. When I didn't answer, the voice morphed into my dad. Don't go, please, Cass. Don't go. Stop it. I pushed myself in the wall, fully preparing myself to hop out the window and make a run for it. I could somewhat make it out from across the room, thanks to the slight gleam of the moonlight hitting the field of grass behind the cabin. I inched closer to it. It went quiet. I waited at the window for another sound. Minutes passed like hours. Cold sweat drenched my back. Dust settled too loudly. When I finally believed the voices were gone, the monster came back with a halting bang. The door rattled on its hinges. It banged again, then banged one more time. I threw open the window. Another bang. I took out the step of the window and then... Thank you. Awkward.
What's your favorite cryptid?
My favorite cryptid? Skinwalker. Yeah.
It's an invitation.
Devin.
What about writing a novel surprised you?
How much it changed from my original idea. So I never did a kind of outline for my novel. I just started from chapter 1 and wrote on. But I had the same idea of what I was gonna do for like 3 years now. And by the end of it, it's nowhere near what it was at the beginning. And I don't know, you're obsessed with a certain idea and you feel like you have to finish just one idea, but by the time, I don't know, you get to the middle or so, you start realizing that your obsessions have changed even in the course of writing that idea. And I think that's what surprised me the most is how quick I was to let go of an obsession and get obsessed about something new. So, yeah.
What was your revision process like with such a big work?
Horrible. No, it was really doable because I had Mary Miller, and I don't think I would have done it without Mary Miller. But I broke it up into sections. I went through from chapter 1 all the way through, and I was more so just copy editing, trying to get the grammar and stuff, cut things that just was too clunky. But I went through again and really started looking at timeline and certain character developments. And, you know, it's not perfect, but I really try to get everything to make sense and to follow chronologically and the limits that I set up for the story. So I try my best to be as smart about it, considering I did have such a short time period to do it, but yeah, it was not easy, not an easy process.
I want to ask, what inspired the co-op? I know you mentioned Skinwalkers and Primary as a favorite, but look, I'm sensing a bit of it and a bit of changelings in there.
Oh, well, I wasn't actually inspired by any cryptid at all. Although I do like them, I do love the Skinwalker, but what inspired it was more so sleep paralysis, which is something that I talked about in my defense earlier. Is I don't have it, sleep paralysis. I don't, but I've always been super fascinated by sleep paralysis. The idea that you're trapped in your own body, in your own mind, as you're envisioning some kind of dark. A lot of people describe it as humanoid figures. Some describe it as something else or some kind of shadows and stuff. But this idea that your brain is forcing you to see something that's not there and it's trapping yourself in that moment, and you have no way of escaping that. So that's where I kind of got the idea as a coach, something that tortures you psychologically, runs you in circles, and even though you're physically in control of your body, your brain is kind of overpowering that. So I think that's where I got the coat from, because the first half of writing this novel, there was no code. Like, that didn't exist at all. It didn't exist until the later half of doing my thesis. Probably, I want to say right when I was supposed to be trying to get it, it kind of came up, and then poor Mary, I had to like, all right, I have to extend it. But no, it came up from just like a lot of different things. Also, just get really fascinated on the uncanny, something about, like, you hear on TikTok, have you all seen the if you see yourself or something, you better like run, or that gets me. And it gets me at like midnight every time. And that kind of stuff freaks me out. Like, something that should look familiar, but there's something way off of it, especially in something that like you see your own double and you know you don't have a twin and they're doing horrific things and they're smiling creepy, and I don't like that. And that's kind of where the code kind of came from, all of those collectively together.
Is there, what kind of structure were you, working with? How did you structure it? What kind of structure inspired you?
Are you talking about like structure as in a timeline, like chronological, or?
I don't know. I think that structure can be so challenging in a long work, and
Yeah,
and so I just wonder how you handled that, if you did, about how you wanted to hang it, if it was like 3 acts or
okay.
4 acts, or
Yeah,
how you managed to find the skeleton for such a long.
I think this is gonna be such a bullshit answer, but I kind of let pacing and my intuition with the pacing do the work for me on that part. I don't know, I'm a lover of horror movies. I'm a lover of books, horror, stuff like that, Hell House, things like that nature. It's just so fascinating to me. And there's always a very specific type of pacing, the slowing down of letting that energy build and then quick, and I let that be pretty much my structure throughout the whole book, is just following that flow, just whatever feels right in that moment. But again, it causes setbacks. Just go based off, if you're not pre-planning, if you're not like really trying to instill a structure, if you're just kind of letting it go, it does have that things get missed, characters didn't develop exactly where you needed it to be because you were so focused on letting the co-op just run wild and free and do whatever to people that, you've probably forgotten the side character that ended up becoming important later on, and you have to kind of go back and focus on that. But I mean, it's chronological order. That's the way I wrote it too. Started from day one on writing, and I wrote all the way to the very last day. And that's how it's supposed to make you feel. Like I told her, the intention is to there's like a micro pacing and then the macro pacing. The micro is that slowing down, speeding up to let you decompress, to build the energy again, each chapter. But then there's also the elongated days at the very beginning when you're starting to learn every information and pick up pace as you go through. I was really trying to focus on that type of pacing as I went. Use that as my structure, as my baseline.
Who would you say is your biggest influence?
It's gonna have to be Stephen King. He's the G. Yeah, and especially this past, it was during one of Alan Ed's classes that I read his own writing. But, I've been a fan of Stephen King for so long, but it was really cool. I don't know if anybody's read his own writing, but if you have or have not, I mean, he puts in like his own drafts that were not great, and then he was like marking with, I don't know, something about that just makes you feel. So on the writer perspective, he's my home base, and then his creative perspective, because he's one of the most known horror writers out there.
I was gonna say, I was gonna guess that because you write fear so well, and he does too, and I got that feeling.
Thank you so much. Now I don't know if I can do like 1,000 pages like he does. Yeah.
So it's interesting because I see Stephen King, but after reading your work this morning with the humor, I wanted to tend toward Poe for you, and I was wondering if you had any influence from Poe, and how do you counterbalance the tremendous humor you have with your talent for horror?
Poe, I haven't read too much. I have a whole collection and I've read like 2 things, but there was like, what's that one with like the glasses where he didn't wear his glasses?
spectacle.
Yeah, I was like, that's one of my favorite. Yeah. But I was like, I think as far as like Southern dark, it's gonna be O'Connor. I think it's probably the one I've read the most, but I come from a really funny family. Everybody uses humor to just lighten the mood, and I can't stick on horror 24/7. It gets under my skin and all. I have to take a break from it, and usually when I do, that's when I go to humor. Harrison Scott Key he's a nonfiction writer, but he's one of my favorite ones. I don't know. It's just both been a part of my life, my whole life. I grew up on true crime, and I grew up on not much of like horror movies because my family's like a lot of scary cats, but a lot of true crime and a lot of jokes being thrown around, even on really serious situations. We've left at funerals. That's just how we joke. But I don't know. I think everybody has both parts to them. I just don't think a lot of people explore it. I think everybody's funny in their own way, and everybody's curious about the darker aspects of life. I think whether you explore that or not may be one thing, especially as in depth as I go, but I think it is part of everybody. I think it's just a natural gene in us. Well, thank y'all.
Thanks again to all our readers, and thank you all for coming, even though you're required to be here most of you. See you all tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.